Hey, what's going on, everyone? Let me just plug in my earphones here. Cool. All right. Okay. All right. Dennis, what's going on? I see a few other people jumped in. Welcome back, everyone. It's good to see everyone, as always. I hope you had a good week. It seems like these months are flying by like all the time. You know, it's like, whoa, I can't believe like 3 months are almost gone out of the year and we're going almost into our fourth month. Bob, hope all is well. Let me know what's new with you guys. Mario, hope all is well. Bob, hope you're doing well, man. Thanks for always jumping in on these. As always, guys, if you have like any questions at all, just feel free to reach out and ask. That's what these lives are for in the group. And I'll try my best to answer them. I don't have an answer for everything, but even if I don't on the spot, I'll do my best to do some research after the live and get back to you with a reasonable answer of how you could apply that knowledge in the real world, under real world stresses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in the live today, we'll be talking about how to build a body that burns a lot of calories. Because that's a struggle for a lot of people. It seems like they could only lose weight realistically when they're eating like very, very little or working out like a tremendous amount. And I'm just going to go with what I did for myself over the years. Take note that it did take many, many years. I've been, I was raised by my grandmother in Ukraine, basically on an off-grid farm for almost the first like 10 years of my life. And then I was just physically active my whole entire life. So keep note on that. I played hockey for almost like a decade, and I did wrestling for a very long time. I was on the UCI paintball team, all that stuff. And I've been rigorously like lifting weights, like seriously, since probably like 16, 17-ish from there. And I'm turning almost 37 in like a few weeks. So just to give you a time frame, okay? Nothing happens overnight, even if you decide to which I wouldn't recommend even if you decide to take the non-natural route. It'll still take many, many years, if not decades, of very, very dedicated work, not only at the gym, but like doing a lot of lifestyle changes to facilitate all those workouts at the gym or whatever physical activity you're doing as well, okay? So keep note that nothing happens overnight, and it took me like a very, very long time to build up this type of metabolism. Dennis, thank you. Always appreciate it. Johnny, Dave, good to see you. Jonathan, good to see you guys. So it took me a very, very long time. But in short, I woke up today, first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, right after going to the bathroom at 199 pounds. So it's a little bit on the lighter end for me. And my body fat through a caliper test, a 3-site caliper test, came in at 13.2. So for males, typically speaking, 20% is already overweight and over 25% is kind of like obese, et cetera, just to give you kind of a reference point. So 199 at about 13.2% body fat. And actually meant to freaking bring my nutrition log to tell you guys what I eat on a daily basis, but I'll try to kind of remember it from here. But basically I require like about 33 to 3,500 calories a day just to be able to maintain my weight at about like 199 pounds. And for example, the second like I dip under that, like I tend to lose weight very, very quickly. So I went camping in the woods for 3 days. And although I still ate quite a bit of food for like usually the dinner meal because we're out and about all day, I still ended up losing about like 6 pounds over that 3-day period. So it goes very, very fast. And that's like a dream for a lot of people. And that's kind of one of the things you could do to make sure you don't rebound from a weight loss journey, because I mean there are a lot of reasons this happens, but remember 80 to 90% of people that lose any amount of weight end up regaining it within a 2 to 3 year period, and usually end up gaining like a few extra pounds on top of that, and then they kind of repeat the cycle all over again, and it happens all over again. There are many reasons to that. Marius, David, good to see you. But one of the reasons is they don't really establish like a very, very good metabolism that burns a lot of calories. So in the sense that they do get down to their target weight, but because they have to eat so few calories to be able to maintain that weight, it really becomes impossible, because you really can't have, well, you can, but it's tougher to have like a social life, because anytime you eat, like for example, you go to In-N-Out, one of my favorite burger places and stuff of that sort, which is like 800 calories for a double cheeseburger, for example. You eat one of those and then like another meal that day, and then all of a sudden, boom, you've gained like, it's usually water weight in this case, but I'm trying to kind of like exaggerate it to make the point. You've gained some weight, and it happens very, very quickly. And it's kind of like unsustainable having so few calories a day or having to work out so much. Let's say you do have reasonable eating habits, but you end up having to then work out so much. I'm talking about like 2 hours in the gym, 5 to 6 workouts a week. And it's not sustainable either, because most people have like a full-time job, and you just don't have the energy to do that. And as you get older, you have kind of like typically less and less energy to have those grueling kind of beat down large volume workouts to do. And even if you do them, your chances of injury increase as you get older if your volume tends to stay very, very high. So the only real solution is just to basically, James, good to see you, is just to basically increase your metabolism a tremendous amount. So you're burning a lot of calories without having to do that much work. I, for example, ironically live a fairly sedentary lifestyle. So I work out 4 days a week, and I do like one yoga session. And the workouts are about 45 to 60 minutes long, and they're heavily, heavily focused in weight training. Although I do typically kind of like at the end of the workout go for like a 15-minute walk at this park near the gym. I typically do that daily, and also do maybe like a 10 or 15-minute walk at night as well. But that's really the bulk of my physical activity. The rest of the time, I'm a remote holistic health coach. I focus on helping people achieve, the aesthetic body they want to achieve, like holistically, without the use of drugs, et cetera, et cetera. Javi, James, good to see you. And it's remote. I work about 2 days a week or so, and it's not rigorous. There's no real physical activity. I talk to people over the phone, create programs for people, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like I'm a construction worker or stuff like that, okay? Not that blessed, unfortunately. So we're gonna go over the steps of what I took over the years and kind of what I implement with a lot of my clients to help them achieve this higher metabolism. So their fat loss is realistic. So they're actually burning quite a bit of calories, not doing that much work. I understand if they're super fanatical about working out, they might enjoy working out long periods of time, but most people just kind of like enjoy it slightly. They like to have it as part of their life, but they don't like it to consume their life. And if you don't really get your metabolism up fairly high, it tends to consume a large portion of your life. So I have my notes here because I don't want to forget some key points, which I always end up doing anyways, even with these notes. But let's kind of go down the list of what actually results in a lot of calorie burning during the day for a typical person. So there are basically 4 variables you want to focus on. And I'm going to go over the least important to most important, okay? So the first exercise is the first one that's least important, but actually, ironically, most people focus pretty much all their energy on is exercise. Exercise typically burns like 0% of your calories for the day, because you've seen these people in the gym, they're on their phone. They do like one set that's way below 70% of their intensity. The 70% intensity is the typical threshold for improvement that you need to do. And then they rest, they have like no game plan. They're really just chitting and chatting, watching the TV, watching their phone. And their intensity is so low, so they could, if they're very sedentary especially, they could be burning like almost 0 calories from their physical training activity. However, the most intense athletes, or the ones with like higher volume, where they're really kind of pushing it, lifting a lot of weights, at most they're burning like 10% of their total calories from working out. So working out is not an effective way of burning calories. And unfortunately, like I mentioned, a lot of people really just focus most of their energy on that. And that's why they look the same. You go to the gym, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you, especially in this group, are going to the gym 3, 4, 5 times a week, sometimes maybe even 6 times a week. And you can look around, and the majority of people just never change. They're there, a lot of them are there probably as often as you are. And they're there for a long time per session. And Sebastian, good to see you. And they look the same, like year after year after year. Some even get heavier, some even get worse. Some maybe make a little bit of improvements, but then you see them a few months later, they look basically the same. And they're putting in the time, but they're putting in the time in all the wrong areas, which is basically working out. So a lot of people think like common sense would say, well, I need to lose weight, et cetera, so I need to work out, but it's not the case. It really just burns like 0 to 10%, I would say on average 3 to 4% for the average gym goer of your total calories. Now again, there's an outlier, 2 to 3 standard deviations. Some people are super intense, so they might burn at max 10%, so it's still not even that much, okay? So that's one category of where you burn calories from. Another one is the thermic effect of food. So it takes your body energy to break the energy down from your food. I forgot the exact percentage on here. It varies a little bit from food group to food group, but for example, like probably fat is around 4 to 6%. Carbs is probably around that as well, maybe a little bit higher than fat. And protein is typically like 15 to 20% of the calorie burns of that specific food. So right there also indicates that just kind of selecting how you structure your food, how you structure your macros will also affect how you burn calories during the day, okay? So that's another big variable to consider. And you can see just structuring your macros correctly actually could burn like a lot more calories than just spending so much time in the gym. There really is no point of just grinding away in the gym for many hours, many days a week. Once again, I'm working out just 4 days a week, okay, and doing like one light yoga session for like 15 minutes per week as well. And that's really about it. And that's what the average person has to do and realistically should be doing because they have probably a job they're working probably 50 hours a week. So their central nervous system can't even handle high volume workouts. And if they try to do those high volume workouts, they just end up being like chronically tired. Then anxiety goes up, anger goes up, sleeping gets messed up, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not even an option for most people. So they really have to focus on a lot of these other variables. Then there's also non-exercise specific activity. And non-exercise specific activity is like what it refers to, activity that's not associated with exercise. And that could be like, for example, even related to your personality. Some people are kind of like very jumpy, upbeat. Some people are like just slouching out. And Javier, Raymond, Felix, good to see you. Also, some other people who jumped in. Good to see everyone. Some people are just like kind of sloths, type personality. I didn't mean to use that word, but they're just kind of like laid back. They don't move around as much, et cetera, et cetera. And they're burning obviously a lot less calories, but your non-exercise specific activity could accumulate to about 25% of the total calories burned during the day. Okay, remember we said exercise is 0 to 10%. Most people, I would say on average from my observation, are like 2 to 4% max. And just their non-exercise specific activity is 25%. So that just shows you how unimportant the exercise portion of a fat loss journey is. And I don't know why people focus so much energy on that. Eric, good to see you, man. Hope you're doing well. I don't know why people focus so much energy on that because it's such a small piece of the puzzle. And typically you gain the most benefit out of it when you master a lot of other variables such as nutrition, sleep, managing your central nervous system, not working crazy hours, et cetera, et cetera. That's where you really benefit from in terms of adding workouts to there. Because remember, working out doesn't give you energy. It takes energy, okay? It takes nutrients. So if your nutrition sucks, if your energy sucks, just doing workouts, unless it's a direct effect of incentivizing you to do better in those variables, just doing workouts will just drive your health and your physique deeper into the ground and you'll look worse and worse and your health will get worse and worse as well. So remember, foundations, it's like a pyramid. You need to lay the foundation first and then kind of build a house on top of it. And if the foundation sucks, it doesn't matter how good the house is, as the structure isn't going to be intact and well. So the points so far, exercise burns the least amount of calories per day. The average, I would have to say, is 3 to 4% for the average gym goer. The most extreme, very intense gym goer with high volume workouts is like 10%. And some people are even at 0%. Okay, so it depends, it varies from person to person. The thermic effect of consuming food. So the way you structure your macros has a huge impact on how much calories you actually burn during the day. And then also non-exercise specific activity actually accumulates for around 25% of your total calories. And like we mentioned, non-exercise specific activity is like, I could be sitting versus standing. So standing, having a standing desk will burn X amount more calories than sitting all day, for example, okay? That's just one example, but the non-specific activities, all your movements throughout the day outside of basically the gym or exercise environment. So it could be many, and it's dependent on the person's personality oftentimes. So if they're very kind of upbeat and jittery, they're going to be burning a lot of calories. If they're very kind of like laid back, they're not going to be burning as many calories. So now let's go to the big player, and this is the one that's really going to do it for you and that people really need to focus on. Scott Hayden, good to see you. Nico, good to see you. That people need to focus on. So that's going to be, I'm sure you guys heard it time and time again, your basal metabolic rate or your resting metabolic rate. I think they're synonymous with one another. It's used either or, they mean the same thing. And it's basically how many calories you burn in a state of rest, okay? And that's actually 50 to 60% of the total calorie consumption during the day. Okay, so it's huge. It's pretty much it's pretty much half or more percent of the total amount of calories you burn. So remember, we mentioned the non-exercise specific activity is 25%. The way you structure your food, it has a big part of it. And then also exercise has a part in it, but it's very, very small. It's 0 to 10%, once again, on average, 3 to 4% for the average gym goer, because the average gym goer is just not intense and not very dedicated to the workouts. That's why I'm giving them that kind of number. But the base metabolic rate is 50 to 60%, which is huge, okay? And that's kind of what I focused on. That's like my basal metabolic rate, for example. It's my basal metabolic rate in terms of the calories that I mentioned, the 3,500 that I needed per day, is based also on 4 workouts per week. But it's around there, okay? So I would need probably, even if I didn't work out, probably like 2,900 calories a day just to be able to sustain my weight and not lose weight too quickly. But a lot of people, they could even gain weight, especially if they're females, maybe off 1,000 calories a day, which, unless you're just eating non-starchy vegetables all day, it's very hard to stay full on that calorie range. And it's a very restrictive life because once again, I'm actually introverted and I don't go out very often. I maybe go out and eat once every 2 weeks or something like that. But most people, it gives them energy to socialize, and it does make it tougher for them to socialize because they just can't eat. They can't eat anything because oftentimes when you go out, like for example, a basic salad at Yard House could be like 1,200, 1,400 calories. And that's their salad. And if this person is able to gain weight off eating more than 1,000 calories, you can see this woman goes there. She's like, well, she just orders a salad. It's 1,400 calories. It's already 400 calories above the 1,000 calorie limit she could have that day. And remember, 1 pound of body fat is 3,500 calories. So it puts her 1/7 basically closer to gaining 1 more pound of body fat just from like literally that one meal. And they usually have like a drink on top of that. Maybe like an actual meal too. And obviously if you're ordering like a steak, it's going to be way more calories. Like 1 pound of steak is almost 1,000 calories. That's not even counting the cooking oils they use on there, which could add an extra 2, 3, 4, 500 calories if you count the sauces too. So you're looking, one steak is 1,500 calories basically, 1 pound steak. And this woman could only eat 1,000 calories a day without actually gaining weight. So you can see how it makes it, she could do it, but it makes it very, very difficult for her to sustain that weight. And like I mentioned in the beginning, 80 to 90% of people regain all the weight they've lost within a 2 to 3 year period. And this is one of the reasons. There are many, many reasons that happens, but this is one of them because it's just not, they're not able to basically eat that low of calorie range. Or if they do up their calories, they have to work out so much more, and it becomes not sustainable on that end too, because also as you get older, you just can't be working out crazy amounts of volume because the injuries will start flowing in. So your workouts are going to be limited. So you have to be much sharper on your lifestyle and nutrition, and especially really get your metabolism especially your resting metabolic rate on point, okay? So how do you increase your resting metabolic rate? There are many ways you could go about it. Let's kind of break down some of them. Justin, good to see you. Scott, good to see you. Let's go ahead and just go down the list of like what I do personally. So the best way to increase your base metabolism is simply just to bump up your muscle mass as much as you can. That's really the only realistic way, and the only realistic way to kind of gain a lot of muscle or enough muscle, whatever your goal may be, everyone is different, is through weight training. And that's it. It's definitely not through doing a lot of cardio. It's not through, what else? Doing hiking or playing volleyball or stuff of that sort. It's really just to build up a lot of muscle. And that's the only realistic way to increase your resting metabolic rate quite a bit. There are other variables, and we'll talk about them in a second, but really it's just increasing your muscle mass. And ideally, you want to preferably add as much muscle as you can before you hit 50, because after that, it's going to be like a steady decline. It's going to make it tougher and tougher for you. So that way, if you're starting with, like, let's say 30 pounds of muscle on your frame at 50 versus 10, the person with 30 pounds is going to be able to sustain a higher resting metabolic rate for their later years. Cocaine really pumps it up. Yes, well, that would increase the non-exercise specific activity because it would cause you to move all crazy and stuff like that. So Eric is correct. So not something I would recommend for my clients to use, but that is something they could do. Although side effects are there, so be careful. So be warned. No free lunch. Wherever you gain in one area, you always lose in another. So yes, increasing muscle. But how do we go about effectively increasing muscle? Because a lot of people totally mess it up here too. So the general rule is like, yes, we definitely do want to be lifting weights as our primary form of exercise to increase our resting metabolic rate, because that's what's going to make the fat loss process sustainable long term. But going to the gym and just mindlessly doing stuff is not going to do it, because your body has not evolved to basically sustain large amounts of muscle, because it's very calorically intensive. Like, I need 3,500 calories almost per day to sustain my weight. But the human DNA hasn't really evolved too much. It's evolved to basically conserve calories, because we grew up as hunter-gatherers, living in caves, et cetera, et cetera. And it's actually a disadvantage to have like an extremely high metabolism in that kind of environment where you have food scarcity. So imagine in like the hunter-gatherer days, I mean, you don't have like a fast food place right around the corner, or, a grocery store that's always stacked with food to have endless amount of calories at your disposal. You maybe hunt like an animal once every, few weeks, and usually have to distribute that throughout the tribe because they're probably helping you hunt that animal. And the body has just evolved to be able to basically conserve fat and get rid of muscle. So whenever you add a lot of muscle, the body tries to get rid of it as fast as it can, because it's not calorically efficient. It tries to store more fat because it could also use those fat stores in an emergency situation to allow you to survive in the wilderness more effective. Because you have to remember, your brain basically kind of controls everything, but your brain is encased in a skull, and it's never actually seen the outside world. It uses its 5 human senses to kind of gather information and then make the appropriate decision of how to allow you the best chances to survive. So in its mind, it still thinks you're a hunter-gatherer, basically stuck in the wilderness, et cetera, et cetera. So it'll still go by that genetic programming. So whenever you put on some muscle, and I'm sure many of you guys have seen it with yourself as well, and you stop working out for like a month or two, all of a sudden it seems like it just vanishes. It's gone. Of course, the second time around, it comes back a lot faster for sure than versus creating new muscle. But it's a very high maintenance machine that requires a lot of calories and also a lot of consistency with your workouts, and also like a lot of lifestyle changes to be able to sustain that muscle, which is very energy intensive, and we'll go into that as well. So like I mentioned, going to the gym and just mindlessly doing stuff isn't going to do anything. Or looking up a YouTube workout and then just doing some random workout, that's not going to be good enough to really transform your physique and pack on a respectable amount of muscle in a respectable amount of time. Results speak for themselves. Once again, go to any gym, and most likely you do see like one or two like fit guys or girls, for example, but for the most part, just the people look the same. You know, they never change. They always look the same, although they are investing a tremendous amount of time in there. And the reason for that is the bulk majority of them are just going there and winging it. They have no game plan. They don't know anything about periodization. They don't know anything about how to structure exercises or what exercises are good for what goals, et cetera, et cetera. They just go there. Marcus, good to see you. Dean, George, Genesis, good to see you. They just go there and they just do random stuff, usually just kind of take up machines. They kind of sit there on their phone. They do one quick set that's way below the threshold of intensity to be able to build muscle. And then they kind of go do some other random thing, maybe chat to someone, et cetera, et cetera. Even sometimes the dedicated ones, I see them kind of pushing hard, for example, but they just, once again, they have the intent and the willingness, but they just don't have the education of how to do it properly. So typically they look up like free information online, and that's always taken out of context. I did another video on this because it requires a lot of insight to be able to create a good program for a specific individual based on their past history, their past injury history, their goals, how to get from A to B in the most effective way, et cetera, et cetera. Bennett, Marcus, good to see you. And stuff of that sort. So you want to stay away from winging it, okay? So what I do, let me pull this up really quick. Let's see here. So I have this workout right here, and I create a new workout for myself once every 3 or 4 weeks, okay? Depending on what I'm trying to do, and I do this for my clients as well. This is super important. Of course, it requires on the back end like a very thorough assessment. Typically, I do a 2 or 3 hour assessment with all my incoming clients before I even write this out to them. That way, you know how to get them from A to B in a streamlined way without guessing, okay? Because the problem is sometimes you do find knowledgeable people giving out information online, but the problem is they never actually met you. So the information could be easily taken out of context, and oftentimes is taken out of context, okay? So this is kind of like a periodized program. So basically you have, what you're going to be doing from week 1 to 3, your tempos, what kind of level of intensity. So remember, developing muscle, you at least need an intensity threshold of 70% or above. Anything below that on a consistent basis just isn't going to develop the adequate amount of muscle mass you need to really increase that resting metabolic rate. So you need to be able to know how to determine that intensity level, how to pick the right amount of weight, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone has a slightly different way of periodizing their programs. I like to kind of break it down to like A series lifts. So there'll be like your main lifts that you're trying to focus on. Then your B or secondary series lifts, which are kind of supplementary exercises that are meant to kind of like basically enhance your A series. And then you also have your C or remedial series exercises, which are kind of like single joint exercises, core exercises. Sometimes people throw neck in there as well. It really depends on the person's specific goal. So usually I do arms or some kind of core exercise for my C series lifts. But once again, everyone is different. But the main thing is you want to have this all mapped out, all planned out. So when you go to the gym, you have a blueprint. You're like, I need to go through this. This is my game plan. This is what I need to do, et cetera, et cetera. And you're not just going in there and like winging it and trying to figure out on the spot, looking up some like random YouTube guy, like what he did for his goals. It's probably not going to work for you anyways, et cetera, et cetera. So remember, as the saying goes, I don't know where I got this from. It's not mine, but if you don't plan, you plan to fail. You will fail. You're going to waste your time if you don't have a solid game plan, because muscle mass is hard to gain, especially for a lot of people that aren't like super genetically gifted, for example. And then it's even fairly tough to actually maintain as well, because it's very energy intensive, and it also requires a lot of rest, et cetera, et cetera. So it requires a person to be consciously aware of how to manage their central nervous system, workload, mental thoughts, spiritual health, et cetera, et cetera. All that stuff plays into maintaining the physique. And some people would say, well, that's a lot, and sure, it's a lot, but there's a reason uh, 9 out of 10 people in America these days are metabolically unhealthy, okay? So it requires like a little bit of effort to be able to kind of like sustain this physique. And you don't have to do it, for sure, you don't have to do it, but don't be surprised then if you go to the gym and year after year you look the same or you look worse, you know? Don't be surprised, because now you know like why. It's because of various reasons, but one of them could be just lack of organization, lack of understanding of how to build up your resting metabolic rate, et cetera, et cetera. So that way you don't kind of start going like, oh, it's my genetics, it's my thyroid, whatever. It's just most definitely you, and you're just doing it to yourself with not having poor organization and being in that situation where you don't know what you don't know and thinking you do know. So I've hired many mentors over the years to help me understand this stuff a lot better, okay? So a lot of times I always stress, you know, be your own mechanic, learn it, pick up books, read endlessly, you know, 2 to 3 books a month at least. But at the end of the day, a good mentor will definitely fast track your results very quickly. And even if you decide to self-educate, a good mentor is always like a good supplement to that learning process, and will really save you a lot of time. So that's that. Let's see what else we got. So fully periodized program. And then obviously before you create the periodized program for the person, there's a lot that needs to be done on the back end as well. And one of the things is, for example, postural correction. So if a person has, like I mentioned in various other videos, there could be a tremendous amount of postural pathologies. The most typical one is like the forward shoulders, protruding head, or you got that Donald Duck shape in the lower, the anterior pelvic tilt, for example, in the lower body, or the lower cross syndrome. Usually lower cross syndrome is combined with the upper cross syndrome. And you see these people a lot, they're kind of like this, and then they got that huge curvature in their lower back, which puts a lot of like shear stress on the discs of the lower back, a lot of compression on the quadratus lumborum, and also just a lot of rubbing of the facets. They're like these kind of bony areas, and maybe even the spinous process of the posterior elements of the back, causing a lot of issues. So you want to know what kind of postural deviations you have, and you want to correct these ideally before beginning like a performance program, because all movement originates from your current state of posture. So if your current state of posture isn't ideal, it's misaligned, then all movement that originates from that posture is going to lead to not efficient movement either, and will lead to faster deterioration of your joints, of your passive and active tissue, okay? So your muscles, your ligaments, tendons, cartilage, disc material, intervertebral discs, et cetera, okay? So obviously that requires a very thorough assessment. That's not something that could be done just winging it. And you have to understand which muscles you need to stretch, which muscles you need to strengthen, and then when it's time to phase into a more performance-based program, okay? Like when do you have those natural curvatures of the back, et cetera, et cetera. So that's important to consider as well. Let's see here. So other things to also take into consideration now, let's say you've kind of actually developed this muscle or in the process of developing this muscle. This applies either or, okay? So muscle is energy intensive, okay? So it will help you burn a tremendous amount of calories, but it's also like fairly high maintenance, right? And for most people, their frame is just not genetically gifted to be able to sustain a lot of muscle, although they could put on a lot of muscle, but just it requires a little bit of back end work to be able to sustain it then, okay? And there are a lot of things you can do here, but one of the things is to understand kind of like how the central nervous system has evolved, and basically how to manage that central nervous system. It's okay, Michael. These videos are up on the page permanently anyway, so don't even sweat it. If you have any guys, if you have any questions, just feel free to interrupt. Happy to answer them. So to understand how the central nervous system has evolved to ideally work and be able to manage that central nervous system to be able to sustain that lean muscle mass. And oftentimes, especially in Western culture, this one's going to be the toughest for most people, especially in American culture, because American culture is all about if you're not doing your job, or if you're not dying for your job, you're not doing your job type of pathological mentality, which has led to an obesity epidemic of a society that's running on chronic fatigue, a lot of anxiety, depression, anger issues, a lot of disease, et cetera, because that kind of thought pattern already leads to the acceptance of a tremendous amount of unhealthy behavioral patterns. And it's totally been normalized, unfortunately. But here's how the central nervous system has evolved, okay? And it basically functions exactly the same way today as it did during our hunter-gatherer days way back in the day when, for example, the Europeans were still hunting mammoths and stuff of that sort, okay? So the ideal way the central nervous system has evolved to function is basically you have a high but short peak of stress. So, for example, the hunter-gatherers, you go out with your tribe to hunt a mammoth. Obviously, these animals are super dangerous. They're like, I don't know, probably the size, I don't know the exact size, but the size of an elephant, but probably more aggressive, okay, and have thicker hides, etc., have all that fur. And it's not like you have like a hunting rifle and stuff of that sort. I mean, you have like, the Neanderthals literally hunted by running up to them and stabbing them with spears. Okay, that's frightening. This is basically like the size of a building of some animal that's trying to stomp on you or hit you with its horns, etc., and you're going up there and stabbing it with a spear. So it's a frightening experience. And sometimes even you get a tribesman that died or seriously got injured, which back then basically meant death, certain death for sure. And then it is stressful. You know, the cortisol is through the roof. Joe, good to see you. The cortisol is through the roof, but then you kill the animal, you know, you have food for a while, let's presume it's wintertime, and you could actually store that food, and nothing happens for quite a while because it's usually quite enough food for a bit. And you're just kind of hanging out in the forest, hanging out with your tribe, maybe fixing a little hut here and there, although they were more nomadic back then, possibly like hunting for fish, socializing, definitely not working these crazy 8 to 10 hours a day behind a computer screen type of lifestyle. You're getting natural sunlight pretty much all day, drinking fresh spring water. The only food you're getting is like wild game and wild fish, and just natural spring water and maybe seasonal fruit of various sorts, etc. And literally nothing, there's no stress for like quite a while. And then you go for a hunt again and there's a peak, you know, there's a peak of stress. So that's ideally how the central nervous system has evolved to function. However, if we look today at today's lifestyle, it's the complete opposite. And this is why you have so many people that are so sick these days. You know, although medicine is, you know, making strides, etc., it's not really doing anything. Just the society is becoming more and more sick, more and more mentally and physically sick. Society has basically become a swamp of like mental and physical pathology. I don't like go ahead and step outside anywhere today. I say this often because it needs to be said so often because people need to kind of wake up to realize that what they're doing isn't normal and is leading to their misery and a lot of disease. And you step outside anywhere, 9 out of people you run into are full of obesity and disease, full of mental and physical pain. And you talk to these people and most of them will say they feel fine. And I'm like, dude, like, that's when you know society has normalized pathology, okay? And it's not normal. It's really lowering the quality of a lot of people's lives. And unfortunately for the people that do end up having kids, they raise their kids to do the same exact thing, which I would argue is borderline child abuse, to raise a person with that kind of belief system. And remember, the greatest virus of all, you guys, is a belief system. Ideas have killed more people in the world than any kind of virus out there, okay? So the Black Plague, coronavirus, whatever other viruses, I'm not a viral expert, for example, but ideas, be it like religious ideas, ideological ideas, how to live your life ideas, have killed more people in the world than anything else, okay? And it spreads just like a virus from mind to mind, and it kills its hosts, okay? So it is as dangerous as a real virus. So I take it very seriously in terms of which ideas you accept and live by, and ask if those ideas are really benefiting you. And oftentimes, if you can't explain to me like why you're following through with that idea, that's an indication of social brainwashing, okay? So a lot of times I go up to a person, for example, and ask them, okay, why do you believe, okay, this person said, I believe ABC, and go like, okay, so why do you believe ABC? Most likely they'll give you like an answer, like right off the bat. But wait. Don't leave quite yet. Ask them one more time. Okay, let's say they answered it. Then ask them one more time, like, why is that? That's it. 90% of people would just go blank after that. They don't know. They don't know, and that's an indication that the person is under social programming and is just like walking blind through life, just following what other people are doing near him and not even thinking for themselves. Sometimes they will answer the second level question, then just ask them one more time, why is that? And I bet you the majority of them will be extremely confused. And remember, they base their whole entire personality and life existence off this belief. And they can't even explain to you why they're doing it, okay? And they wonder why they feel so lost in the world, empty, have a huge story gap, oftentimes getting into the wrong relationships, wrong occupations, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so all these things tie into the human health and human body, and more importantly, increasing your muscle mass and maintaining that, because the human body is a system of systems. So guess what? You got to deal with all the systems. You got to make sure they're all working on full throttle. If you want to truly be healthy, okay, if you want to truly be mentally and physically healthy, you just got to do all this stuff. And that's just how it is. And if you don't, from my observation, you will have some short-term results here and there, but most often it's not going to be too impressive. And it's most likely not going to be long-lasting either. You'll just revert back to your old former self of misery, disease, and obesity, okay? Most often, but there are some exceptions, but it's very rare. So going back to the central nervous system, these days, it's the complete opposite from our hunter-gatherer days. I mean, today you have low-grade chronic stress followed by peaks of high-grade chronic stress, which is the worst for the central nervous system. So the typical person today, for example, let's cover it, gets up, not well rested, probably had shitty sleep or few hours of sleep, is tired, gets a cup of coffee, that shoots cortisol through the roof already, especially since he's hydrated, probably not drinking water throughout the night, obviously. Gets on the freeway. It's actually like super stressful to drive your car. A lot of people don't know, but your central nervous system has to be really revved up to be able to stay in the lanes, look out for other cars, et cetera, et cetera. Let's say you hit traffic. That's going to spike your cortisol as well. And it's not bad. It's low, but ironically, it's this low-grade chronic stress that really messes you up because it's insidious and it's constant. And it's just like 7 days a week for a lot of people. And then they get to work, and you obviously have like in a lot of places, the social politics of the work. There's always this one worker that you just don't like dealing with. And imagine dealing with that person for 8 hours a day, and it's just like miserable and stressful. Let's say they're unpredictable with their projects, and then you guys get blamed as a group and your bonus gets hurt because this person doesn't want to do the work, etc. Or you have a boss that like is very kind of conditional, doesn't understand nonviolent forms of communication, is miserable themselves and is coming to work short-tempered and full of misery, and then passing that down to you, etc., etc. So cortisol is pumping out pretty much all day, every day there. For lunch, you go get some more coffee because you're dragging and you're tired. Driving home, you get into traffic again. Coming home, a lot of people are living in a love-hate relationship, so they're not even happy with the people they're with at home, and there's a disconnection of core values because they married the wrong person to begin with. That's causing a lot of stress as well. Super highly inflammatory diets are very, very common in America, so very, very high omega-6 ratio to omega-3, for example. And all of that stress on the central nervous system is going to make it like seriously close to impossible for you to sustain a muscular physique, because when you're pumping out cortisol, Lisa, good to see you. When you're pumping out cortisol, you're not going to be producing a lot of testosterone. When you're chronically stressed, your testosterone is going to go down. Your testosterone goes down, your muscle mass will start to diminish, your sex drive will start to diminish. Sometimes cognitive function starts to diminish as well. That vitality, that spark towards life starts to diminish, et cetera, et cetera. And how are you going to sustain that muscle mass and get intense workouts in when you're blowing your central nervous system out of the water with this kind of shitty ass lifestyle? It's I would say like almost impossible. And for the occasional I do see some people in the fitness industry, for example, that do possibly maintain a good physique doing this, but most of the time they're just on a lot of drugs, on a lot of steroids and anabolics, and they're still like very, very tired, very sick inside, usually have like anger, anxiety issues, et cetera, et cetera. They're just kind of pushing through it, you know, and you don't want to be in that mindset of like pushing through it. You just want it to naturally happen, okay? So that's another thing to consider. So oftentimes that means a lot of people, dude, you got to quit your job. If you're working like 50, 60 hours a week in a high stress environment, especially if that high stress environment isn't aligned with your core values, you're not going to be happy in life. You're not going to be able to sustain your workouts and muscle mass because you'll just be too tired, too fatigued, because this is just a bombardment of stress and distraction on the person's life. And going to boot camps and CrossFits or doing intense workouts is just going to drive you deeper into the ground because as I said before, workouts do not give you energy. They take energy. They require energy, okay? So if you don't have that energy, if you don't have that health to begin with, there's literally no point of doing intense workouts or even moderately intense workouts. You're literally just driving your body and your mind deeper into the ground, okay? Especially doing these like hardcore boot camps, high cardio sessions, et cetera, okay? So take all this stuff into consideration because if you don't change all this stuff and you're going to the gym constantly and you're wondering why you're looking shitty, not getting the results for the amount of time you invested, wonder no more. At least now you have the answer and you don't keep wasting your time, okay? So what can we do to manage stress on our central nervous system? Is it taking stress away or adding more enjoyable things? Yeah, so Sebastian, it's so variable from person to person and it depends on what that person wants out of their life. I can tell you what I've done personally, and I can probably, if I knew that the person in front of me and their specific situation, I can give them better advice. But for me, when I was finishing at UCI, it was towards the end of the mortgage collapse, 2008, 2009, and basically nobody was, it was very hard to get work. The economy was in shambles, and I'm sure everyone here has lived through it, so they know what I'm talking about. And a lot of my friends that I was graduating with were kind of panicked. They're like, well, how am I going to get work, et cetera, et cetera. And I was already coaching like very part-time, maybe 10 hours a week. Sometimes I would even take 2 or 3 weeks off before finals just to study for the finals. So I wasn't even coaching people during that time. It was on a quarter system, for example. And I was getting, 35 or 40 or 45-year-olds coming in for coaching that typically pursued the kind of mindset of like, if you're not dying for your job, you're not doing your job. They pursued these hardcore corporate jobs, stuff of that sort, okay? And I already saw what, 10, 15, 20 years of living that lifestyle does to a person, and it's not pretty, okay? Most often they're very miserable, running on chronic fatigue, like very, very overweight, full of disease, on 2 to 3 different medications. And they consider themselves a success. I consider that kind of like a failure in life because first and foremost, like no matter what your goal is in life, whether you want to be like a programmer, a president of a company, work for yourself for whatever, or be an academic, which is all great. If you're not mentally and physically healthy, how are you going to accomplish those things? Like, how are you going to accomplish anything with having major depression or serious clinical levels of anxiety or anger issues? Or what's going to happen when you run your central nervous system into the ground and then you develop cancer at 40, for example. I've known already quite a few people that have gotten cancer and died from it. In most cases, it takes serious amounts of self-abuse to cause cancer to form in your body, about a decade or so before it starts becoming clinical, before you die from it, okay? And it's estimated about 50% of Americans now develop cancer in their lifetime, and half of those die from it. So 50% means like basically every other person on this call. And it's estimated to be getting higher and higher. And there are many reasons of why this happens, but one of the biggest reasons is just the central nervous system is being burned out by this low-grade chronic stress. So to answer your question, here's what I did. It was scary, but I knew I couldn't pursue the corporate lifestyle because there's no way, I didn't see any way. I saw good ways of how to do damage control for sure. I saw good ways of how to do damage control in that kind of environment. There are many people that do a great job at damage control, but I saw no way of how to optimize my mental and physical health working that environment for various reasons. I've done many podcasts on that, so I'll be happy to link it to you at the end because they're usually like 2 or 3 hour conversations, but mainly because those kind of environments don't facilitate the biological system or the way the human body has evolved to function. So obviously, if you take one system that's meant to function ideally in this environment and put them in another environment, they might work, but like if you take a software that's meant to create this kind of program, but you could probably use that software for other programming needs, but there'll be glitches, tweaks, the program will crash often, and AKA a tremendous amount of mental and physical pathology. And results speak for themselves. Don't even take my word for it. Go into any corporate office and literally like 9 out of 10 people you run into are extremely sick. Very overweight and full of obesity, et cetera, et cetera. And even if they don't seem like they're overweight, it's only because the standards have dropped so low. I actually had a very extensive amount of corporate workers fill out like an HAQ that I got from the Czech Institute. And literally almost all of them have serious gut issues, serious anxiety, depression, anger issues, serious adrenal fatigue issues, serious musculoskeletal issues such as low back, neck pain, shoulder pain, et cetera, et cetera. And once again, it's totally normal in that environment. Not the majority of them will say they feel just fine. It's because they've been feeling so bad for a long time and oftentimes don't have a way out of that lifestyle, that because of cognitive dissonance, they've just kind of distorted it in their mind to believe that that's what they want altogether, just to be able to continue that path. And it's unfortunate, and they probably raise their kids to do the exact same thing. And it's very sad to see from an outside perspective. But for that's why I didn't go in that environment. So there was one time where I did the wrong thing. And I went into the right occupation, which is health and fitness, which is what I love to do. I've been doing it my whole life. Once again, I was raised by my grandmother on that off-grid biodynamic farm. So I understood the importance of nature and your interaction with nature from day one. And my grandmother died at 87, only going to the hospital one time to give birth to my mom. And she was pretty much in great health until probably the last year of her life or so. But hey, no one makes it out alive, you know. But my point being is she literally never even went to the hospital, and she was able to fully function at 87 and take care of the homestead on her own because the husband died about like 10 years earlier, okay? So that's just an example. Like if you live in tune, your body has evolved and your mind has evolved to live a certain way. And if you don't live that way, I don't care who your nutritionist is, who your personal trainer is, who your life coach, guru, or what kind of medical plan you're on, you will always have, even if you're very good at damage control, you'll always have glitches and tweaks and stuff. It just seems like the machine is breaking down, but you're really good at making sure it doesn't break down quickly, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I think the health profession, and I'm not only the medical profession, but also the fitness and holistic circles a bit as well. They have a lot of very smart people there, but the problem with a lot of health providers these days is they're in the mindset of we're stuck in a swamp of physical and mental pathology that's basically society today. And how could we exist in this swamp of mental and physical pathology? They do this oftentimes because they themselves are stuck in that pathological model and their business depends on that model. Because remember, sick people means clients, okay? No sick people, no people. If you have a healthy population, like my grandmother, for example, okay, how are you going to sustain all these hospitals, these pharmaceutical companies, physical therapy offices, chiropractic offices? I mean, there's a whole entire industry built on managing pathology. But my thing is like, dude, stop being in that swamp. Like, literally just step outside of it. Stop trying to figure out how to live in that swamp of pathology and sickness. Just literally step outside and go do something else. This path has already been proven to produce misery, obesity, and disease. Don't go down it, okay? You already see what's going to happen to you, okay? Who cares if you have like a house and 2 cars and your kid could go to college? It's like, dude, like, big deal. Like, you're miserable, you're full of obesity, full of disease. Get your core priorities straight. You could achieve that if you want that truly, but make sure you take care of your mental and physical health first, because that sets the foundation to all of everything you do in life, including your happiness. You can't be mentally happy if you're physically sick. Remember, inflammation starts in the body and leads to inflammation in the brain, okay? And they're all interconnected. The body and the brain, not two separate things. They're all one thing that influences each other. You can read a lot of work on neuroplasticity. Just your thoughts can change your physiology. And enough negative thoughts during the day, and the majority of people, I forgot the number, I just have like thousands and thousands of negative thoughts every single day. That will manifest itself physically throughout the body by changing your actual physiology, okay? So it's all interconnected. So remember, don't learn how to be really good at surviving in the swamp of mental pathology. Just get the fuck out of the swamp, dude. These industries with really smart people, they depend on this swamp for money and business. If everyone, for example, was like my grandmother, they wouldn't exist. They'll go out of business, or they would have to, I don't even know what the hell they would do, but they definitely would be making no money with the way they're currently practicing, because no one would need to show up to them. So you need to fix that. And sometimes people say, well, it's hard to do that, you know? And I'm like, okay, cool. That it might be tough to do that, but it's also hard to be living in that swamp of like mental and physical pathology, which unfortunately society has become today, okay? It's very, very hard, and a lot of people are struggling mentally and physically quite a bit. So, yes, and to go back to your question, I'm going on different tangents here. Yes, there was a period where I also got stuck with social programming, because I saw a lot of my friends working a tremendous amount of hours, and I saw a lot of my coworkers working a tremendous amount of hours, and it was just kind of like the American way. So I thought that's just what I had to do. And I had a lot of people reaching out to me for coaching, and I genuinely wanted to help these people because I knew I'd give my heart and soul to helping them and do everything possible to help them get from A to B. And I was afraid if they went to like another coach or like a medical doctor, they would just be getting these cheesy 5 to 10 minute assessments and very little follow through, very little anything, maybe just a rent a friend at best, and that's about it. And I just didn't want to see that, because I valued these people's happiness as well, and knew how much their life would improve by also adopting these health principles, using movement as medicine, learning about organic food, learning how to manage your central nervous system, learning about the society, like the swamp of physical and mental pathology, and kind of ideally how to disconnect from it, et cetera, et cetera. So I worked for those long hours, but then I noticed myself getting tired oftentimes with, I was also working out a lot more. I didn't understand the interaction between working crazy hours and also doing high volume workouts, for example. So I was driving my central nervous system more into the ground. And I was just at one point, just like always tired. I mean, I was very fit looking on the outside, but I was just kind of like your typical fit looking sick person, basically. Just very like tired, anxious. That's about it. I kind of didn't develop a lot of serious clinical pathologies because I didn't stay in that lifestyle long enough. But if I did, it most definitely would have happened, okay? So, but at one point after doing that for 2 or 3 years, training, 8 appointments a day, 6 days a week, I was like, I felt tired, anxious all the time, and just always felt rushed. And I'm like, dude, this doesn't feel right, And I'm like, well, my friends are doing this. Even my clients are living this way. Everyone else is living this way. But then I looked around and I'm like, man, these people aren't doing well either, and they're doing a lot worse than I am. Like a lot of people I know from college are like already obese, and they're not even 40. They're on like 2 to 3 different medications just to help them survive every day. That's not normal. That is not normal. That is a life of pathology, okay? And I looked around, I'm like, dude, there's no point of doing this. This is stupid. And I don't even need this many clients. I'm just doing it because basically it's social programming of wanting to like maximize your productivity and all this stuff. That's very very praised in Western culture, et cetera, et cetera. And I stepped away and I started doing 3.5 days a week. Instantly, like all my anxiety went away. Imagine if I was like the average person and I went to the doctor's office. There's no way they're going to talk me into getting stop working 5 to 6 days a week of a crazy stressful schedule because they're doing the same thing. So see, they're also stuck in that swamp of mental and physical pathology. And they'll just like, oh, here's some anti-anxiety medications, which is what happened, especially when I was dealing with social anxiety at an earlier age. And I went and I did many podcasts on this, so I'm not going to elaborate it anymore. But yeah, they would just go like, here, keep working your long ass hours, take some anti-anxiety medication, take some antidepressants, shut up and go back. No follow through, nothing, And that's just what the average person is going to get, and no wonder why they never get better, because oftentimes to be a good coach, you need to understand behavioral science very well and behavioral change, because that's the key. All the information that you need is online for free. But guess what? You're not going to be able to do it because it's the equivalent of me giving you a manual on how to build an entire car from scratch. How many people will be able to reconstruct that car? I mean, all the answers are there. All the answers are there. But very, very few, pretty much no one will be able to do that. Like, where are you going to get all the tools? How do you know which tools to use? Do you know if you could legally kind of make all that noise in your garage? Do you have a place to build the car? How do you know where to get the parts? Which parts? Which are the fake parts? Which are the high quality parts? A million other things. Like, there's so many things. It's not about just having information. It's about implementing that information realistically in your weekly schedule, given your demands, okay? So there's that aspect as well. So basically I died down from 6 days a week to 3.5 days a week. And then now I'm kind of leaning more towards semi-off-grid living, which is basically what I did with my grandmother. So I started working remotely, maybe, I don't know the exact date, maybe like 3 to 4 years ago at this point, okay? Because it provided me even more freedom of time. So now I just work 2 days a week, and I spend 2 days a week on continued education, which is super important for me. And then the rest of the time on activities that I feel are missing in my life at that time. So at one point, it was just getting rid of my social anxiety. At another point, it was then finding, the love of my life. And then at another, right now, I'm learning about how to get back into the wilderness lifestyle again, like bushcrafting skills, et cetera, et cetera. All these things take time, but it's what I feel, what I need at my life at this moment. And that's the balance that seeks harmony in your body, which calms down that central nervous system and allows you to maintain that muscle mass a lot easier, okay? So you have to concentrate on all this background stuff, okay? Because it's all very, very important. And like I mentioned, if your foundation sucks, whatever you build on top of it is going to suck as well and not going to work out for you long term. And then you're going to be wondering, I'm investing all this time, all this money, but I keep getting sicker and sicker. And that's why your foundation sucks. So you got to fix the foundation. And then after that, build the house on top of it, okay? And that's what has to be done. That's what has to be done. If it was as simple as taking a pill, then why are so many Americans still sick? Because the pharmaceutical companies are pumping out these pills left and right. Why are people getting sicker and sicker? Oftentimes the side effects from this medication 2 or 3 years down the line are even worse than the symptom of why you took the medication to begin with. And now instead of like one issue, you have 3 or 4 issues that you need 3 or 4 different drugs for, which create 3 or 4 other issues. And I've seen so many people that have like a cabinet, 20, 30 different drugs that they need to take every single day, half of them just to counter the side effects of the other half. And they're still super sick and obese. And they're like, my doctor is so great. He could prescribe my medication so quickly. That's their definition of a good healthcare provider. How fucked up is that? A good doctor is a person that gets you off medication, not just puts you on more medication. That's fucking criminal, dude. When I see that, it's like so disappointing because these people deserve so much better. And it's just they don't know how to find a good healthcare provider. And unfortunately, society has been brainwashed to perceive these medical guys or girls as kind of the epitome or the apex of health and wellness, where, trust me, go ahead and do this yourself. Go to any medical convention. I've gone to a few. Some of the sickest people you see in the world are there. Not some, like a lot of the sickest people you see in the world are there. And if they understood about health and wellness, they would be healthy themselves. And if they don't know how to be healthy themselves, how are they going to teach you how to do it? They're not living true to living a healthy lifestyle. Because once again, they're in the model of living in this swamp of pathology themselves and being very smart and elaborate on how to survive there instead of just getting the fuck out, possibly cleaning up the swamp, and then having a good, clean river to swim in, instead of this like nasty, nasty swamp that all it does is just make a tremendous amount of money off the suffering of a lot of millions and millions of people without actually providing a cure for anything. Because remember, the medication doesn't really cure or prevent anything. It just keeps you alive long enough to be a customer to keep paying until you die, and then that's it, so ooh. Anyways, okay, so I went on a bunch of tangents like I always do. I'm going to end it here. There's so much more that we can cover. Obviously, it's endless, but I think you guys understand the picture of how to actually create a sustainable, lean, muscular body and be healthy, and more importantly, happy at the same time, okay? So it requires all this stuff for you to do all this stuff. In terms of the degree of how to do it, it's going to vary from person to person depending on their goals in life. But to a degree, it's going to require you to do all this stuff, and that's just how it is. And I'm just going to remind you, and I don't mean this in a depressing way, that if you don't do all this stuff, don't expect like great results, because it's just not going to happen. Okay. I'm just saying it that way because I don't want you guys to invest all this time. Like, I did all these boot camps. I did this keto challenge. I took this anti-anxiety medication, and I'm wondering why I'm still all messed up. I'm wondering why I had this symptom before, but now I have this symptom, and all you're doing is chasing symptoms your whole entire life. If it's not this thing today, it's that thing tomorrow. That's why your foundation sucks, most likely. And that's just how it is. So you got to fix it there and then kind of move on from there. Okay. All right, guys, thank you for your questions. Thank you for jumping in. It's good to see all of you. Justin, Sebastian, I have a bunch of other people. Randy, good to see you. Can't wait to see your pictures. Looking amazing, by the way. Damien, good to see you as well. Lisa, Mural, great to see you. You're doing great as well. Already down 25 pounds, which is great to see. Michael, all right, and then everyone else. Of course, I missed a few people here, but of course, thankful for all you guys. And I will see you. Yeah, I will see you guys next week. I'm going to do another good one next Friday. Okay. All right, guys. Take care.